from ABC News Radio, KMET 1490 in Southern California. This is Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgensen.
Welcome out to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio. I am your host, Tyler Jorgensen. For over a decade, I've been bringing you today's top entrepreneurs, and today is no different. We have the one and the only, the Acoustic Force, Pat Hilton. Welcome out to the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Pat, I'm excited for this interview because I've watched the last couple of years of your journey. But like most overnight successes, right? You've been at this for much longer than the last couple of years. But before we dive into everything you are doing and your background, when was that first moment, Pat, that you realized you're different and you're an entrepreneur?
So I remember working at Emo's Pizza in St. Louis, Missouri in high school. And I was in a local band. We had just recorded our first album. I was 16 years old. We recorded it in my friend's garage. And we released the record and we played a show, like an album release. And we sold $20 tickets to all of our friends. They got the album. They got the live performance. It was like a little bundle. You know, we were gurus before gurus were even around. And I remember making like $300 that night. And looking at the cash and thinking to myself, man, this is more than you make in a month at the pizza shop working 5-6 hour shifts. How can you just do music gigs and get paid? And, you know, a couple of years later, I graduated from high school, picked up an acoustic guitar and started doing just that, playing in corners and traveling all over the country, and eventually met you on that journey. And here we are.
So there's a big gap, obviously, between like that first thing, but I love the early days of entrepreneurship, especially people that started in high school or you know, before they hit the real world. I feel like there's a special space there for people to, like, you experiment, but your consequences are super limited. But you learned a lot from that. You learned about, you know, provide bundling and value stacking, and that you can create more revenue and more income through, you know, smart offers as opposed to just putting in the time. But then you went off and you had a journey of getting here, right? What was one of the biggest challenges or mistakes that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
So challenges and mistakes. So challenges was getting people to accept that, like, my funny personality brought serious amounts of, you know, value. And I know that word value gets a little funny in entrepreneur world, but it is true. There is a valuable asset in entertainment and humor and performance. And we've noticed over the last few years with conferences and with content and all these things becoming a part of your business, that you can't avoid getting on camera and talking about your offers or talking about who you are. Or, you know, people don't necessarily know that much about Tesla, but they know the CEO is Elon Musk. And so I think that the strategy for me now is a lot different than it was back then. I just wanted people to laugh and like my songs. But I think that the challenge behind that was that people thought I was a goofball, and so they didn't take me seriously when it comes to how much are we going to pay this guy. He'll just show up and do it and have a good time. That was a struggle for me and a challenge, because I wanted people to value what I did, but I also wanted them to have a good time. And there's a fine line between business and partying.
Yeah, there's a very fine line between entertainment for entertainment's sake, and then like infotainment, right? Where you're not only entertaining, but you're also bringing in the heat, dropping the knowledge bombs. Now you have performed on some amazing stages, some big names. Go ahead. Let's like give your highlight reel of name drops of some of the places you performed.
So over the course of time, I performed with my guitar at Mandalay Bay for Grant Cardone at 10X GrowthCon 2. That was a 10,000 person sold out venue. And I've gone on to do events with Carlos Reyes and the All In Entrepreneurs. A lot of real estate people really liked my talent and they valued it. It brought something cool to those conferences. And so from there, I've got an event MC for with Gary Vaynerchuk at the end of this month in Puerto Rico. And I'm also MCing and speaking with Ed Milet at the next All In Entrepreneurs event in May in Phoenix. So, I mean, things have really perked up for me as far as channeling that entertainment energy and becoming an MC and a speaker rather than just the funny song intro guy. I now speak and tell stories and tell people how to position themselves as an authority, and as well as introduce the speakers and entertain people a little bit. I think it's become a lot more media and marketing and authority positioning rather than just having a good time and singing tunes, which there's still a time and a place for that. But I think that was my step into the business conference world. And then once I started to pivot into more of an MC and a speaker, I think that's when I really started to hit a momentum stride.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely what I feel like I watched that pivot happen. It was really
You
neat.
did.
And so you became
met me
now
when I was
instead of
just the funny song guy.
right. Yeah. And I mean, I knew you were more than that, but it was, your brand was still just, I'm the acoustic force. I'm going to do a big roundhouse slam kick. Right. And that's going to be entertaining. But what people, I think, sometimes forget, maybe not if they have any experience in it, is that to be a quality MC in an event of the caliber you're running, you also have to understand what's going on there, right? You have to get to know each of the speakers. You have to be able to introduce them in a way that like sets them up for success. Because there's a big difference between a crappy and a quality introduction. And there's a big difference between a crowd that's ready to learn and a crowd that is falling asleep in their chairs.
Big time. And I think that the entertainment factor for me, the confidence that I built over all those years, all those gigs it's funny because I tell the banter that I used to do in between songs of telling stories and making shot announcements and all this kind of stuff. I mean, back then I was a party animal. I'm almost 4 years sober now, but I think that I didn't really think that was anything other than just part of the gig and part of the work that I was doing, when in reality, that was actually the value that I deliver now at these events. The announcements, hey, we're going to take 5 minutes, but we're back here in 5, or like you said, introducing someone, pivoting, telling what I've learned from them, or an Ed Milet or a Gary Vee, how much impact they've had on my life, and helping me share my story and be open about my sobriety, or playing in dark corners for 15 years and really just putting it out there. And it was a hard pivot, but it was a necessary pivot because it gives me the ability to show both sides of the coin. You know, it took me 20 years to make 6 figures last year. And this year we did it in 3 months with our company. So I think that I'm catching my stride. And if I just stay working hard and honest, I think that there's an unlimited potential here.
Yeah, absolutely. So as the CEO and founder of now Acoustic Force Media, where again, you used to be just the guy, Acoustic Force. Now you're Acoustic Force Media. You're building a team, you're building a brand and an offering, and you guys now create media for brands. And how do you still infuse who you are and your energy into now quality media, helping brands, as you say, turning business leaders into disruptive marketers?
So I think that what I realized, and I think that other people kind of told me this about myself before I saw it, like the Bradleys or the Grant Cardones were like, man, when you go up there and you tell that story about how you were sleeping in your van and you wanted to quit, and now here you are playing at the biggest business event, like, dude, that's what you need to pull out of other people. How do you get other people on a camera saying that, record it, and then post it on their social media page? That's your offer, man. That's what you have the ability to do because of your personality. And so I literally just said, why don't we hop on a call with people, help them record their content, batch record their content for the month. The team chops it up. The team posts it for them. And now, you know, all of a sudden they're positioning themselves as an influencer online. We've got clients like my good friend, RJ Bates, who's got millions and millions of views on TikTok, millions of views on Instagram. He's gotten acquisition managers and cold callers and mastermind sales all coming from content that we produced for him, just doing his YouTube show and us repurposing it. So there's an unlimited amount of potential for people that are willing to just get on camera and tell their story. And it can be hard and it can be weird at first, but the more comfortable you get doing it, the more people are going to want to do business with you.
You know, I remember I went through a really, really hard time in 2008, like the Great Recession era. And it took me almost a decade to share the story. So I had so much shame about failure and so much guilt. And actually, like the reason I started this show over a decade ago was to talk to entrepreneurs because I needed help rebuilding momentum. And so I'm like, man, maybe if I can just talk to other people. That's why one of the main questions I ask is, what was a challenge you faced? How'd you overcome it? It's because I needed the help. I need the advice. Right. And so, but I remember the first time I finally shared publicly that like I'd had to go through a bankruptcy and that we'd had to lose, like let go of some properties. And it was the weirdest thing. It was like, man, sharing that hard time, the first time was really painful, but then it's out there, it's in the universe. Right. So now it's easy. Now you just talk about it. And it's amazing how many people I know went through similar challenges or faced similar like obstacles and needed to be able to like have some camaraderie or have some motivation that it gets better. And so it's amazing how often like us holding back, like we do it out of our own ego, but it's stopping us from being able to help and implement or influence others. Right. So I love what you're doing now with helping entrepreneurs tell their story so that they can actually create greater influence. As you've been building up the Acoustic Force Media in that company, what are some of the challenges you've faced and how'd you overcome those?
So one of the challenges I faced at first was, like I said, when I started to pivot into not being like a performer and being more of a speaker and a host, was people, maybe being a little concerned. Is he just going to go up there and goof off? Is he going to, I don't know, is he going to pull a Chris Rock or whatever, right? Whatever the new joke is, fine.
Right.
But I think that once people started to see that I did have the experience, that I have done the 10X and that I have done the Gary V book release and that I know these people and I've incorporated their lessons into how I present. Once I let go of the guitar and stopped showing up with it, there was nowhere to hide anymore. So I think one of the biggest struggles was, I was the acoustic force. I always had the guitar, like the guitar was my thing. But once I didn't show up with that little mask that I would hide behind and come up with rhymes and all the funny lines, then I didn't have anywhere to hide anymore. And my intros got deeper and better, and the positioning was good. And I was able to take people on more of an emotional roller coaster during my segments. And I think that's where the pivot happened, was when people really saw me as a host and as a speaker and as a transition artist rather than just an entertainer. That's when people were like, oh, well, man, can you fly out to this place and do that for me? I want to pay you to do that here. And that was when the conversation changed from, well, I want you to manage our account and we want you to speak at all of our events. What do we need to do to make that happen? Do you need to send us a contract or this or that or the other thing? Everything I had ever done up until that point was off a handshake, even the Grant Cardone event. And so things were becoming more and more professional. And so, going from taking whatever I could get and barely paying the rent to stacking up 20 clients and having contracts is a whole different ballgame from where I was 2 years ago.
Yeah, no question. I really think there's some to unpack there about the guitar. So you're the acoustic force because of an acoustic guitar.
Right.
But it's interesting that became a mask. It's almost like instead of it being a tool of helping you share your message, it became a crutch that actually held your message back. But now that you've like removed the mask, are you able to now then redeploy the message when you want to and use the guitar? Or are you like, I'm no longer using the guitar ever?
So it's just, like I said, it just depends. So like at this Gary V event, I have a segment where I do 10 minutes of music. And then there's like TEDx style 10-minute speeches. So my first 10 minutes when I open up the whole thing as an MC is I sing and play. And then in the middle, I have a 10 minutes too, where I tell people, hey, welcome. Hope you like the first 5 speakers. My name's Pat. I'm going to be your MC for the rest of the retreat. And this is who I've become from what you saw when you guys were coming into the door to now me helping you understand where everybody is in the production and who's helping us on video and this and that, and really making us a community this weekend and kind of bringing together my production experience and performance experience into clarifying me as an authority as I am hosting you through this process. And so it's interesting. Good. So I think that the guitar still works, but I think that it's more of its own musical thing rather than me using it as part of the conference. It's just its own thing now. Yeah.
Which I think is great. Again, it's back to being a tool that you can choose to use when you want to, as opposed to a crutch, which I think is so good to hear. So you're really involved now in your media company in social media management, video marketing, podcast production. What are some of the trends that you're seeing working with your client? I mean, one of the things that really made me jump off is that, with Instagram and Meta, whoever trying to get Reels performing, they've been paying bonuses and you're leaning into taking advantage of some of that. What are some trends? What are some things that people need to be aware of here as they go through this year in social media?
So I think what's always worked for me, we're starting to see that work across the board for people, and that's 20 to 30 seconds. And since day one, when I caught Gary's attention for the book signing or Grant Cardone's attention for the 10X, I mean, those were big milestones for me from just being like a bar performer to getting the attention of the biggest guys, the guys that I was following, and having them tell me, yo, your ideas are great. It's because I kept it short and I kept it simple. 20 to 30-second videos, the vertical, like all the way up and down on your phone, like the Snapchat story. In my opinion, Snapchat was the first company to ever do full vertical. Well, that is now the theme across Reels, YouTube Shorts, and TikTok. That's where the market's going. When you pull up the GPS to get to Kroger or wherever you're going to buy your, steaks tonight, that GPS fills up the whole screen. It shows you exactly where you're going. That's how people are consuming video now too. That's what text message looks like. So you want to make your media look just like what the user is looking at all day. And that's full vertical. And so that's one thing that changed, but the thing that didn't change was the 20 to 30 seconds. You got to keep it short. I think that people will still consume long form content like this show or a Joe Rogan or whatever you're into. But I do think that the clips are what goes viral. Like a Jimmy Kimmel clip with the Roots, or Jimmy Fallon or whatever his name is with the Roots. I see those go viral. Metallica's on there with a kazoo and it goes viral. I watch it, but it's 20 or 30 seconds.
Yep.
So I would say keep it short and digestible. That's what's worked for me this whole time. And now that is an industry standard, I think that's really helped us amp it up because that's my strength.
That makes sense. I think what's funny is there was a time where, the old people would film vertically and we'd be like, hey, look at this guy. Come on, turn the screen. Yeah. And now everyone's back. We're all back to holding it vertical again. It's funny how those kind of things change because the user interface of apps have changed. I think you're right. Snapchat was they embraced the vertical phone experience and now everyone else is catching up and doing the same thing. But it's interesting because like this show we film horizontal, but I do my best to make sure, okay, are we all back far enough so that we can chop it up and repurpose and do some vertical because that's how people are going to want to consume it. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the difference between media that is like media and consumption versus just social sharing is smaller and smaller. Like what works is what's working, whether it's an organic post or something you're doing to drive a message, short, consumable, hit America's attention span, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And it's the same thing that happened with, Blockbuster. Netflix brought it right into the bedroom. So that was eliminated. It took people's time away. People didn't want to buy albums anymore. They just wanted the one song. So they went and they either bought the single or whatever. It's the same thing with this stuff. Well, I don't want to watch the whole 30 minutes. I just want to see the knockout. So that's what UFC posts on their Twitter. They show the person get kicked in the head and it's over. Cool. And that gets 15 million views and helps them sell pay-per-view. You might as well just give people the clip because that's what they want. They want to know immediately what happened in the fight. And that's actually a great example. UFC, if you don't have the $40, you can go on their Twitter and literally keep up play by play with what happens all night long. And so if your company isn't giving people the play by play, how can they possibly know what you're doing?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when like Napster was happening, right? Decades ago. And the artists all got upset, like, you're stealing money from us. But they were actually able to show that because of the increased consumption of their music, ticket sales and album sales increased.
Oh, way up.
It's a similar thing now. It's like, if you're not the one distributing the content and giving the micro content out there, either A, no one's going to find your content and consume it, or B, they're going to do it like pirate it and find a different way to get it because they want it that way. So why fight it?
Yeah. I mean, my buddy Afro, man, it's no secret that his song, Because I Got High, went viral on Napster, and that's how he got his record deal. Some kid that he handed a CD to at some event he was rapping at, uploaded it on Napster, and it changed his entire career. So don't be afraid of giving stuff away, like the Grant Cardone thing. Like, I knew that in the back of my head because I used to tour with him. Just give it away, man, because the person who loves it is going to hook you up more than you could ever imagine.
For sure. Now you have kind of a 3-step plan of what people need to do in order to start driving and being more successful through their media. Part of step 1 is creating an execution plan, right? Mm-hmm. How important is it to actually have a plan of attack when you start taking your media more seriously?
So I think it's important to just understand what you do. Number one, like, what are you? Like, RJ Bates III is the cold call real estate guy. So it's very simple for us to go in and say, okay, this is how we want it to look. This is how we want it to feel like. And then when it comes to producing it, he's either closing a deal or he's getting turned away, sometimes cussed out. And, third is how are we going to distribute it? So you've got your what's your message? How are you producing it and how are you distributing it? And so distribution, I say you need to post at least once a day. And a minimum one post per day, preferably short form video. Even if you can find 10 minutes when you're working out or you're walking to your car or whatever you're doing, you're at lunch. Hey, it's, lunchtime with Steve. If that's the only 2 minutes you have, use that and turn that into your daily update. But you've got to have something to where people can come and find you, hear what you have to say, and know what you do and what solution you offer. Because if they find you and they find it interesting and you get good enough, who knows the opportunities that could come. Like I said, RJ happens to have sold tons of masterminds, found acquisition managers, cold callers. I mean, his bill with us, he upgraded. He called me wanting to pay me more because he was doing so well. Let's post 2 a day. I'm like, okay. So, I mean, the opportunities out there. The tough thing that people shy away from is some people aren't confident in front of the camera. That is only going to get better if you practice. It's right. Unavoidable.
Yep.
And then, number 2 is, well, what am I going to talk about? It's just like what we said. Maybe you talk about your bankruptcy. Maybe you talk about, hey, I've been struggling with alcohol for a while, but I'm 9 days clean. Who's with me? I guarantee you, if you put out the truth, people are going to resonate with it.
Yeah. A friend of mine, somebody that spoke at a similar, at the Dream 100 Con event on the first round, she said, you share your scars, not your wounds, right? Like, hey, like tell the stories, tell the war stories, right? Maybe not when you're in the middle of it, maybe not, right? Like you got to be careful to not just become the drama channel,
right?
But share the wounds, share the stories, share the experiences. And it's interesting. There's a growing trend on TikTok and Reels right now about how you're going to suck at something at the beginning, but you've got to suck at it to get good. But I feel like there was this period of time where our generation, I think especially, became so perfectionistic that they didn't want to put anything out on social until it was perfect. And I think we're finally back to a point, where I think you can be raw. Everything doesn't have to be so perfect. Like, yeah, you know what? Like that post only, maybe it got 10% of your normal engagement, but you went on and you did the one the next day and then the next day and the next day. And
that's the key.
You just got to keep going.
That's the key. I think that there was an Instagram era there for a minute that was so polished and so photoshopped and so perfect with the yachts and the cars and the watches and, up and comers, even myself watching that. I'm like, I don't know if I'm even going to fit in with these people, man. Cause I'm like a rugged Missouri boy who's just old school, throwing hay and, playing in barns with his guitar, with a speaker, trying to make it. And the reality is that, people who are successful and who are the real deal, the Gary V's and the Uncle G's, they actually respect that more than you could ever possibly imagine. And so don't be afraid or think that you don't fit in. Maybe fitting in isn't the goal, In Tetris, that old game Tetris, when you fit in, you disappear.
I like that analogy.
When you fit in Tetris, yeah, you get points for it, but you disappear. And so maybe sometimes the goal isn't to get those points. Maybe the goal is to make a point to not fit in, because I stood out to those people. And that's why now, years and years and years later, we get a call from, Gary's team and people associated with Gary, and they want me to host that event. How cool is that? And I'm getting paid for it.
Yeah.
It's great.
No, it's amazing. And I that Tetris line, I think is my biggest takeaway so far from our interview, is that it's amazing how often we think we need to fit in, but usually by fitting in, we're one, giving up something of who we actually are. And that doesn't help us to succeed. And 2, you're not getting found. And so if your goal is to grow, I love that you have to get clear on your message. That's one of your first steps. One of your second steps is you actually have to produce content, right? If you're not producing content, you can't post anything. And I love that in the last one, you talk about making a clear call to action. How has that changed in your business? Because I know when I first met you, you didn't really know what you were selling. And so now, how, not only for your business, but in the content that you help create, how do you make sure you have a clear call to action?
Yeah, so I think that we really want to make sure that we talk about, what is the company, like I think RJ is a great person for people to follow. Number one, he's a good friend of mine. He supported me for years, never became a client until December. So 4 or 5 months ago, even though I've known him for 3 or 4 years. And so it's a great example of someone that you've known for a while, but you didn't really know that you guys had this dynamic difference in talents and services that you needed from one another until later when you're like, all right, well, maybe we should take this on and try this. And it explodes. He always wears his Titanium Investments hats. So it's Titanium Investments, dead giveaway. And then Titanium Crucible is always the call to action. So the Crucible is his real estate coaching system. And the cool thing about all of his content is he's calling people that are selling their homes. He's either giving you a tip in front of his little rig, his calling rig, or he's calling someone. So he's either getting a deal, getting blocked from a deal, or giving you a tip in between cold calling. So you're literally seeing a CEO who runs an investment firm calling a list. And so he's actually doing the work. And I think it's a great example of, you might as well just document what you're doing. Like I said earlier, if you're Steve, the construction guy, and you want to sell more construction jobs, why not take a break in the truck and it's truck time with Steve? Hey, listen, here's what we're doing today. We're building the deck. We've got this many planks. They weigh about this much. I got my 3 guys out here, Jerry, Tom, and Ted, and they're going to do this. We should have this pretty close to finish by 3. Maybe I'll show you guys on my stories at 3:00 what it looks like compared to, right now at 12, we're getting pretty close. Give people some kind of way to an insight of what you actually do. So I love that. That would be my thing with a clear call to action. If people already know what you are, Steve, the construction guy, or RJ, the investor, or Pat, the media guy, then they know when they click already what they're going to buy or not buy. You're either buying social media marketing from me or I'm hosting your event. It's one or the other. I don't sell anything else.
Right. That makes sense.
So with RJ, it's like you're either coming to my event or you're selling me your property. It's one or the other.
That's it. It's one of those two. So Pat, to me, business is about lifestyle. It's about creating the life you want to live. It's here as a way to fuel and fund that. What is one major item on your personal bucket list you're going to accomplish in the next 12 months?
So I'm moving into my first house. I've never been a homeowner. I am at the end of this month here in April. So we closed on a property. So I think that's pretty cool. I'll have my own little headquarters. That's been a goal for a while. And like I said, I never made 6 figures until last year, but this year we did it in 3 months and growing. So I personally don't like to put numbers on everything. I just like to try and live up to my potential. But I think that my potential is a 7-figure CEO. And I think that I don't say that enough because I shy away from it too, folks. But I think that I'm capable of becoming a 7-figure company. And that's yearly income. And, our spreads are really good for me. I make a lot of profit, but I also pay my guys well. And so I think that that's the key. I pay my people well. I take care of them. And I go out there and I lead by example. I hang out with real influencers. I'm on stage with real influencers. I'm showing you that if you invest with my company, that the leader of that company is actually doing what he says. And I think there's an unlimited amount of growth there for me. So
I agree.
1 with the house. And I would say 2 future would be maybe a 7-figure year here. So
awesome. So thank you so much, Pat, for coming out on the show. Please go give Pat a follow on Instagram. He's Pat Hilton Live or Acoustic Force Media, and check out acousticforcemedia.com. To my biz ninjas, wherever you are listening, watching, or tuning in, it's your turn to go out and do something.
Thank you for listening to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with Tyler Jorgensen. Please make sure to subscribe so you're first to hear new interviews and episodes. If you found this podcast to be valuable, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to visit our online dojo at bizninja.com to claim your reward for listening to the show.